And most of the time, this would be coming from the accountant of the manufacturer, the supplier, because they would actually be the one that has to create the invoice. So it'd be an accountant, bookkeeper. It could be the distribution, specialist or whatever, but usually it's an accounting type position that's doing it. Nope, you're just finding the rates. Here, I'll walk you through the first one here just to help you out. So, you got her? Okay. Let's do the first one together here quick. So for the first one, 5% discount means it's a 95% that you're going to pay. 11% discount means you're paying 89%, so that's 0.89. And of course, the 3% gives us 0.97. You multiply that together. We get 0.820135. But we are looking for the single decimal equivalent here. That's not the single decimal equivalent. The single decimal equivalent is found by taking 1 minus that. So 1 minus 0.820135 is 0.179865. That is the single decimal equivalent.
I think it'd be 0.820. You get 0.786315.
95, 89, and 97. I can try it again just to make sure. 0.95 times 0.89 times 0.97. Nope, I mean 820135.
So is the 0.820135, is that the net discount equivalent?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So yes, the net decimal equivalent is the 0.820135. This is a part a lot of people will mess up on the test, is when I ask them for the single decimal equivalent, they don't subtract it from 1. In the process of getting that single decimal equivalent, you're going to have to get the net decimal equivalent first. But that's not where you stop. You have to go that one step further to get the discount equivalent. So any questions on that part? Okay. I'm going to scroll up here, and I'm going to let you guys find that last one on your own then. We'll come back in a couple minutes. Okay, let's do this one, see how you're doing. I know some of you haven't had time to finish yet, but so we've got the 8% is going to give us 0.92. The 4% is going to give us 0.96, and the 12% is going to give us 0.88. For 0.777216. So then to get our single discount equivalent, it is going to be 1 minus 0.777216, otherwise known as 0.222784. Single discount equivalent. The net decimal equivalent is 0.777216. Any questions on those? So our next step. Now that we've established a net price, that's the price that's going to go on the invoice. we have to figure out the rest of the invoice. There are a few dates that are important in invoicing. The first date is the invoice date itself. And that is the start of a timeline. And that timeline usually includes a period at the beginning called the discount period. During that discount period, there's going to be a discount for early payment. Now, this is another one of those things that depends on the textbook you're using. Most often, that is referred to as a cash discount. I've seen it referred to as an early payment discount, a prompt payment discount, an early payment incentive. It all comes down to the same thing. If you pay within a certain period of time, they're going to give you a discount. The term cash discount seems deceiving to me because cash means you pick up the product, you give me cash right now. Not, pay me within 5 days or 10 days and I'll give you the discount. But you got to remember, in big business, a lot of these transactions are taking place through correspondence. So they're shipping goods and they're mailing back payments. So they have to have time windows. So then, of course, at some point, this will be the end of the discount period. Well, still starting at the invoice date, going all the way to the end of this timeline, is something called the credit period. The credit period is the time you have to pay or else. Now, or else doesn't mean they're coming with a baseball bat to break your legs. Or else means, and it's usually written right in that invoice sales contract, that on this date, if not paid, this will convert over to an interest-bearing note. So if you have not paid this, this now is no longer an invoice, it is now a debt, and you are going to be paying interest on it. This is all part of what is called the terms of sale in an invoice. The terminology, the most common terminology would look something like this. 210, comma, that N/30 is read net 30. What this means, 2% discount within 10 days of the invoice. Net amount is due within 30 days of the invoice. So if we think in terms of that timeline, let's say that this invoice date is May 20th. What that means is that this timeline starts May 20th. How long is the discount period here? 10 days. So that means they have 10 days until the end of the discount period. I'm just going to put end discount here. What date is that going to be? May 30th. Good. 10 days past the invoice date. So on May 30th, the discount ends. During that period, there would be a 2% discount. How long do they have to pay? 30 days. You got it. Well, not June 20th. You're close. May has 31 days, so it'd actually be June 19th.
When they say that, is it on the day or is it the day after that?
Usually it's the close of business on that day. However, there will be, we're going to talk about them in a little while, there are invoice date modifiers that we will talk about. Now we're just going to talk about a couple of them. There are dozens of them in the industry. We're just going to expose you to some of them.
You can just find every clever way to screw you.
Oh yeah. So what if, we noticed, a lot of you are a day off on the end of this because you don't have a calendar embedded in your brain. Well, in your book, on page 396, they actually have the days of the year listed out for you and numbered. So on page 396, if you looked at May and went down the side and found 20th, you'd follow those, and you'll see that May 20th is the 140th day of the year. So what that means is this is day 140. So to get the end of my discount period, I would just add 10 to that. So that would be day 150. To get to the end of my credit period, remember, I always go back to the invoice date. So 140 plus 30, this would be day 170 here. So back to that page 396, I find day 150. Day 150 corresponds to May 30th, which is what we have. I find day 170, which corresponds to June 19th. So that chart will help you count the days. So let's say we have an invoice date of July 24th. We have terms of sale. $115 net 60. Find last day of the credit period and last day of the discount period. So on our timeline, remember we have the invoice date, we have the end of the discount period, and we have the end of the credit period. What date's going to go in for the invoice date? Yeah, 205. July 24th is what's going to go in there. And if you look on your chart, July 24th is day 205. You are welcome to count them out on your fingers or on a calendar if you want to as well. But let's stick with that chart. So the end of the discount period, how long do they have? How many days is the discount period? 15. So 205 plus 15 would be 220. So on the chart, 220 is August 8th. Going back to the 205, how many days are in the credit period? 60. So this would be 265 here. 265 corresponds to September 22nd. You got it. It really is. And we're going to use it in the next unit as well, in like week 11 when we start doing short-term loans and notes and discounting notes. And I won't say any more because I don't want to scare you.
So do accountants or accounts payable, do they have these standard charts?
Yes, they do. In fact, a lot of times the computer programs, they have the new computer accounting programs, you just type in the terms and it'll figure out those end dates for you. So now to back up and answer my questions, what is the last day of the credit period? September 22nd. Now, I purposely asked those in reverse order on you. The last day of the discount period then is the August 8th. Well, I want to do that, just make sure you're paying attention. It's really easy to mix those two up. Well then, let's apply this a little bit. Let's say your invoice date is December 17th. Your terms, 210, net 45. You know the question, find those two dates for me. So let's see how you did so far. What is the end of the discount period? December 27th. If you're using the chart, that would be day 361, because December 17th, your invoice date was day 351. Now, if we're using the chart to get the end of the credit period, we have an issue. We go past the end of the year. There are two ways that we could do this. One is we would just take our 351, add the 45 days, which is going to give us 396. Then we can subtract 365, which gives us 31, which means it is the 31st day of the year, which is January 31st. The other way we could have done that, could have taken 365, subtract the 351, which is 14 days. We could then take our 45 days here, subtract 14 days, we are left with 31 days. So that tells us we're 31 days into the next year. There are applications coming up where each of those methods is going to be usable. So I know there's going to be one of those methods that seems easier to you. Usually it's this top method that seems easier to me. There are going to be some applications where we have to be able to do the bottom method. Any questions on finding those dates? Okay. So let's look at invoice date modifiers. And effective invoice dates. What invoice date modifiers do is they change the effective invoice date. In other words, they change the number at the beginning, the date at the beginning of this timeline. We are going to talk about two of them. One of them ROG, that stands for receipt of goods. Some items, especially large items, can take a while to ship. It might take days to even sometimes a couple weeks or more for really large items to ship. Well, if you have a 10-day cash discount period and it takes 11 days to ship it, you didn't even receive the invoice until after your discount period was up. So what they do is, like most of your major shippers have what's called a return receipt. Yes. Now with all the electronics and the internet and stuff, the company that is selling, the supplier, actually can get a computer message the day that the shipping company delivers it. So they get that message saying it was delivered today, we just delivered it. So then they're going to put that in as the effective invoice date. The date that the goods are received, or the date that the shipping company says the goods were dropped off, is the day that this timeline starts. We'll look at some examples of that in a minute. The next modifier is EOM. It stands for end of month. Now it really should stand for should be EOP, end of period, because not every business works on a 1 month period. Some businesses might do this every 2 weeks. They might do it every week. What this is usually used for is smaller businesses that don't have like huge accounting departments. Maybe it's a small business, a sole proprietor owns it and has a few employees, and the owner is doing their own books. And maybe the owner doesn't have time to sit down every day and fill out invoices and send them out. So they might pick once a week, maybe every Saturday they sit down and do the invoices. Or they might pick once a month. You know, maybe on the 10th of every month they sit down and do invoices and send them out. So what happens is the invoices get put in batches. It's called being batched. The invoices are batched. So what happens is we have these periods. And now, I hate to say it, but like some small companies where it's the owner doing the books, Some of those don't even have set periods. Some of them just, whenever they have some free time, they go do the invoices and send them out. So in a really busy time, it might be 3 or 4 weeks. Slow time, they might get time to do it every day or two. We're going to assume that we have consistent time periods that's being done, just because for academic purposes, we have to have some consistency to make it a little bit easier on you guys. So what happens is all of the invoices for this period, the merchandise is being shipped out and the invoices are put somewhere in the loading dock or the shipping department in a basket or whatever. And then they're pulled out by whoever does the invoicing on the certain day. They are printed or processed and sent out to the buyers. That becomes the effective invoice date. The merchandise may have already been shipped, but the invoices just weren't processed and sent out. Then the next period, that merchandise gets shipped out during that period. All those invoices are gathered from the loading dock on a certain day and processed and sent out. Now, some of you might be wondering, why are the circles not matching up? Why do I have this little gap here and this little gap here? Well, because a lot of times, the invoices making their way from the loading dock up to the bookkeeping office might take a day or two or whatever, depending on the size of the company. So if I'm sending out invoices on the 10th of every month, merchandise that got shipped on the 9th, those invoices might not be printed off yet, or they might not made it in the basket yet. So a lot of times there's a lag time between this. Now, for the purposes of this course, we're going to assume those invoices are processed on the last day of every month. They said, okay, yep. Now,
Would they refer to as lead times?
Yes. Yeah, that's part of it. So now, depending on the company you're with, we're just assuming it's the last day of the month for our purposes, for the company we're looking at. Each company may pick a different day. Like I said, they might pick the 10th of the month. They might pick, the 1st of the month or the 5th or whatever. They might pick every Saturday. For our purposes, we're going to assume it's done monthly and it's done on the last day of every month. Then that lag time that we talked about could be a day or two. For our purposes, we're going to assume that it's a standard date because each month is a different length. So we're going to assume that cutoff is on or after the 26th of the month. So that any items shipped on or after the 26th go into the next month's batch. Does that make sense? So, I want to make 2 columns here. Invoice date and effective date. If the actual invoice date is May 18th, what will the effective invoice date be? What's the last day of May? May 31st. If the actual invoice date is July 27th, what will the effective invoice date be?
July 31st.
Careful. I was just going to say it's going to be really tempting to say July 31st. The problem is it's after the 26th. That does not make it into the July batch. It ends up in the August batch. So does the August 31st. That's the one that catches everybody. If its actual invoice date is March 3rd, what will be its effective date? Yeah, March 31st. There are 31 days in March. If the actual invoice date is February 25th, the effective date will be
Also March 31st. Oh, no, wait, February 28th.
28th, yes. Now I get asked this all the time, when February is so short, don't they need more time? Yeah, they would. In reality, they would. But to keep this class simple, we're sticking to that 26th as the cutoff. So the 25th still makes it into the February batch, even though it's a stubby month.
Should that be a /29 for leap years?
Yeah, we're not going to worry about that, though. But you're right. It would be 29th on a leap year. Yeah.
All right.
I'll do this for you.
No problem.
Okay. Now, here's the other thing. The EOM, they don't list a net. So the end of the credit period is assumed to be the 30th of the next month. It is assumed to be a net 30. Now here's the question that comes up, well, what about February again? So do the ones that are processed in January that end up with the effective date of January 31st, are they February 28th, the end of the credit period, or is it March 2nd? Again, that depends on the company. For this class, we're going to avoid the month of February.
So typically it's the 30th of the next month, not 30 days after your transaction.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Well, it ends up being the same thing. The 30 days after this effective date would be the 30th of the next month, except for February, who doesn't get 30 days. But
Okay.
I've never figured out why they don't just go with, like, July or March, take a couple of those months that have 31 days and give February 30 days just to make it equal out. I've never figured out why they haven't done that. That's possible, yeah.
First rotations around the sun.
Actually, the months are lunar.
Oh, the months, yeah. That's what I meant.
So invoice date, let's say it is June 18th. The invoice amount, $2,800. Terms, 210. Net 30. How much is paid, or how much is due, I guess you could say, if paid on July 2nd. So let's get used to our timeline here. Invoice date, end of the discount, end of the credit. Are there any modifiers to that June 18th invoice date? Say no.
No.
No. That is June 18th. So the end of our discount period is going to be June 28th. The end of our credit period, July 18th. It's just 10 days to get to the discount period and 30 days from the invoice to get to the end of the credit period. It is paid on July 2nd. Did they get the discount?
No.
No, so the amount paid, $2,800. Very good.
Is that back cut?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we have an invoice date of November 7th. Amount of $8,100. The terms. $210, $115 net 30 is what that reads. The shipper confirms delivery on November 24th. So the invoice is dated November 24th. Is that where our timeline starts?
No, it's November 7th.
The invoice date is November 7th, I should say. Receipt of goods means that we are going to start our timeline on the delivery date of November 24th. Now notice I got two end of discounts here. This is the end of the 2% discount. This is the end of the 1% discount. So 210 means 10 days from the invoice date, which is the 24th, which is going to be December 4th. Good. That would be our 2% discount in that period. 115, well, there's 1% in that period, and it ends 15 days from the invoice date, which is November 24th. That is December 9th. Perfect. And finally, our credit period ends December 24th. Good. So, how much, assume I'm saying how much is paid, I'm just being lazy. How much if paid on December 6th? Now I'm going to show you a shortcut here. What percent discount do they get on December 6th? 1%. Rather than finding 1% and subtracting it, we're going to use the complement again. $1 cash discount is going to result in 99% paid, so a factor of 0.99. So we are going to take that invoiced amount of $8,100 times 0.99. So they're going to pay $8,019. Any questions? So we've got a date, invoice date of December 28th, an amount of $5,300. terms, 210 EOM. How much if paid on February 3rd? Where does your timeline start here? Careful. EOM, would this end up being December 31st? January 31st. Why January 31st? It's after the 26th, so it does not make it into the December batch. It goes into the January batch. So that means the discount period would end 10 days after that effective date. That would be February 10th. The end of the credit period? We said it's always the 30th of the next month, so February 30th, right? I would accept either February 28th or March 30th, or March 2nd, I should say.
Why not March 1st?
Because March 2nd would be the 30 days after the invoice.
If you're doing leap years, it would be March 1st, but...
You're right. If it was, you are right. If it was leap years, it would be March 1st. We're assuming no leap year here. Good point. So, we are in Feb... I will not mess with leap years on the test, I promise. So we paid on February 3rd. They do get the 2% discount. Now, this is where that EOM, that end of month dating, is really extreme. I mean, how on earth do you get stuff on December 28th, not pay till February 3rd, and still get a cash discount? I mean, that's way out there. But that's the weakness of that end of month dating. That's why if you're in business for yourself, if you have to batch your invoices like this, try not to do it monthly. Try to do it at least weekly, so that you're not pushing those. I mean, here's a person that had. But I mean, that's kind of how credit cards work too. If your credit card is processed on the 25th, you make a charge on the 26th. That doesn't appear on your bill until the next month, and you still got 30 days after that to pay. So I mean, it does work that way for revolving credit too. So how much are they going to pay? Well, 2% discount means a 0.98, right? So 5,300 times 0.98. What did you get? $5,194 is the amount paid.
I like that. It makes it real simple to do the 0.98.
Yeah. Well, there's a good reason why I did that, because in a little bit we're going to talk about partial payments. Yeah. And that 0.98 is very important there. Let's talk about shipping. The big question, who pays shipping? Well, this is defined in the sales contract. The term used, and I don't know why they do this, it's confusing, is free on board. And what they're doing is they're defining who doesn't pay. Free on board is going to be abbreviated FOB. There's FOB shipping point and FOB destination. Who is at the shipping point? That's the seller, the sender. That means it is free to the sender, free to the seller. So that means the buyer pays the freight. At the destination, of course, is the buyer. So it is free to the buyer. The seller pays the freight. So that takes us up to 7:20. It is time for our second break. Let's take 10 minutes. We'll come back at 7:30 and we will pick up with that shipping discussion.